Hey everyone, welcome to HFY Galactic Empire Fall. Real human stories, nothing more artificial. Because HFY begins with humanity. I'm Naira Solis. Subscribe. The signal starts now. Not by much. A fraction. The thin blue bar should have moved with the chamber clock, smooth and exact. Instead it held for a beat, then slid forward to catch up, as if it had needed to think about it. Lena Vale looked at it once, then placed her notes flat on the table. The pages were real paper. Station policy allowed printed copies in formal talks if the material had been cleared and logged. The sheets had a pale fiber grain that caught the light differently from the table surface. She aligned the corners with 2 fingers and left them there for a moment longer than needed. Across the room, Orensei tightened the latch on a field case and checked it again without looking down. The case sat beside the wall under the secondary console, matte black, no insignia. He had opened it once when they arrived, laid out 3 instruments on the shelf inside, then closed it with the careful finality of a man who preferred things sealed until they were required. The side monitor corrected itself. The blue line moved as it should. Lena took her seat at the center of the narrow table. There were no microphones visible. The chamber listened through the walls. Oren remained standing. "You can sit," she said. He glanced at the chair nearest the door, then at the inner glass panel that separated the chamber from the observation lane. His reflection was faint there, pulled thin by the angle. "I'm fine." Lena uncapped her pen, then capped it again. "That usually means you expect a problem. It means the chair is too close to the wall." She looked once at the distance. It seemed ordinary. He moved the chair by 2 centimeters anyway. The legs made almost no sound on the floor. Then he sat, not leaning back. On the far side of the chamber, the entry seemed brightened to white. A silent notice. Guests approaching through the controlled corridor. Lena rested both hands on the paper. Anything new from scans? Oren checked the small tablet near his knee. No weapons. No devices beyond what they declared. Atmospheric trace consistent with prior contact. Their escort stopped at the outer lock. And the mirror issue? He did not answer at once. He turned the tablet off and set it face down on the table. Not an issue yet. Lena looked at him for a second, then toward the glass panel. Her own reflection sat with her, pale and doubled in the low light. The chamber had been designed to feel open while preventing direct line-of-sight exposure from the observation lane. Too much glass for some species, not enough for others. Human compromise. Transparent, but only from the right angle. "Is that your careful version?" she asked. "Or your reassuring one?" "The careful one." She nodded once. "Good." The entry seemed widened. 3 visitors entered without speaking. They were taller than the briefing projections had suggested, but height was difficult to judge across species when posture carried different meanings. Their movement was dry and exact. No wasted shifts in balance. No visible hurry. Their garments lay close to the body, layered in matte segments that bent like woven ceramic. Each wore a narrow band at the throat, dark green, almost black. The first stopped 2 paces beyond the threshold. The other 2 remained just behind. Lena stood. "My name is Lena Vale," she said. "Special Envoy, Terran Interhabit Council. Thank you for coming." The first visitor turned its head slightly toward the sound of her voice. It had no obvious eyes from the front. The face was structured in planes, smooth and pale with a faint mineral sheen, interrupted by 3 narrow slits placed too high to be a mouth and too low to be sensors, at least by human instinct. When it breathed, nothing moved. Lena waited. The visitor remained facing her for a beat. Then, with slow precision, it turned 90 degrees toward the glass panel at the chamber's side. Not toward the moon beyond it. Toward the reflection in the glass. It spoke. The sound did not come from where Lena expected. It seemed to gather along the surface itself, as if the panel had found a voice and was returning one. A layered tone, low and dry, with a second thread beneath it that arrived an instant later. The translation system embedded in the table lit green. "We acknowledge the human image." Lena did not move. Oren did. Not much. His right hand left the table and settled on his knee. Not reaching. Not signaling. Making ready. Lena kept her attention on the visitor and, beyond it, on the doubled room in the glass. "I am here," she said. The translation field pulsed, sending her words through station conversion. The visitor's head remained angled to the reflection. The image is accepted. The second and third visitors shifted by a degree, no more. An adjustment within formation. Lena placed one palm lightly on the top sheet of paper. "You were invited to speak with the Terran envoy." A pause. Then, "We are speaking." Her reflected hand on the glass lay where her real one did, open on the page. Oren said, "Not a translation artifact." He said it softly, meant for her alone, but the chamber carried sound cleanly. The first visitor did not react. Lena lowered herself back into her chair. She did it carefully, without breaking the line between herself and the panel. "Then we begin with this. Why are you addressing my reflection?" The answer came quickly this time. The direct form is loud. The returned form is usable. Lena let the sentence settle. There were ways to mishandle first anomalies. Treat them as insult. Treat them as mysticism. Treat them as theater. Most failures began with choosing too soon. She slid one sheet from the stack and turned it over. Blank side up. The paper made a dry whisper. "Usable how?" The three visitors remained still. The first spoke again. "The returned form holds its edge." Oren looked once at the side monitor, then at the glass. "Lena." She knew that tone. Not warning. Data incoming. What? The panel response time just changed. She kept her face neutral. "By how much?" "Enough." The visitor nearest the glass inclined its head toward Oren's reflection, not toward Oren himself. The other human sees measure. "This is correct." Oren did not answer. Lena said, "Then perhaps we should adjust the room." No. The word arrived harder than the others. Not louder. Cleaner. The first visitor lifted one hand, long and jointed in an arrangement that made no effort to resemble a human one. The hand hovered near the glass without touching it. Alteration would damage the exchange. Lena glanced at Oren. He was already looking at the wall console. No motion, just inventory. Lights, airflow, proximity readouts, pressure values. The kind of silent arithmetic that kept people alive and sometimes prevented embarrassment. She said, "No one will alter anything without notice." The visitor lowered its hand. "Acceptable." The side monitor's delay line hesitated again. "Hold catch up. Hold catch up." Oren noticed. So did Lena. Neither mentioned it. Lena folded the blank sheet once down the middle. "You requested this meeting after the Keled corridor incident. Your message said you wanted cessation terms reviewed. Correction." Lena looked at the reflection rather than the speaker. "We requested a true mediator. Your kind sent one." She did not smile. "That part remains under discussion." The second visitor made a small movement then, a tightening through the shoulders beneath the segmented garment. The first spoke before it could continue. "The border war continues because each side presents only its front. Fronts collide. Returned forms reveal shape." Lena touched the folded paper with one fingertip. It was not nonsense. That complicated things. "Are you saying both sides are misreading each other?" "We are saying direct address produces damage." Oren leaned forward slightly. "Then why meet in person?" No answer came from the first visitor. Instead, the third spoke for the first time. Its voice on the glass was thinner, with a rasp in the lower layer. "To test whether humans can speak without striking the surface." The translation held. Odd phrasing, but intact. Lena repeated it in her mind. Speak without striking the surface. She had spent 12 years in treaty work. For systems. 2 famine corridors. 1 evacuation chain that had held for 9 days and then failed in the 10th hour because someone on a relay station had inserted a word meaning yield where the original had meant pause. Most conflict looked ideological from a distance and procedural up close. A wrong surface. A damaged return. She opened the folded paper and flattened it again. "What happens?" she asked. "If we do strike it?" The first visitor turned its head a degree further. enough that its face and reflected face no longer aligned. You already have. The chamber seemed smaller after that. Not because anything had changed. The table remained where it was. The monitor delay line kept its small private hesitation. The moon beyond the outer pane moved at the same glacial pace. But the sentence had placed a border inside the room. Oren uncrossed and recrossed one ankle beneath the table. A minor reset. Explain. The first visitor did not. Instead it stepped closer to the glass. Its reflection stepped toward Lena. She stayed seated. The visitor raised its hand again and placed 2 fingers on the panel. The surface did not mark, frost, or light. It simply held the contact. Lena could see her own reflected shoulder just beyond the pale joints. Then the translation field spoke without any visible input from the visitors. Archive trace detected. Human contact history present. Oren was already on his feet. He did not lunge for the console. He moved left, putting himself where he could see both the visitors and the room controls without crossing Lena's line to the panel. His chair remained angled slightly wrong behind him. Source? He asked the room. No answer. The chamber system repeated, in its own plain voice this time. Archive trace detected. Glass surface memory active. Lena turned slowly toward Oren. Surface memory? He was reading 3 things at once. That's not a standard chamber function. The first visitor withdrew its hand. Now you perceive the problem. Lena looked at the glass. Her reflection looked back, still, composed, one hand near the paper. The faint seam of the observation lane ran beyond her image like a second horizon. Human contact history, she said. Who was in this room before us? Oren's jaw shifted once. No one should have been. It was cleared at station dawn. Should have. He was already moving toward the wall console. Records can say a room is empty. Rooms can disagree. The third visitor spoke again, but softer. This is why we refused your transmissions. Your machines erase what surfaces keep. Oren reached the console and stopped with his hand a centimeter from the controls. He did not touch them. Lena. She knew why he had stopped. Any alteration now would muddy the only live read they had. Worse, it might confirm the visitor's warning about damaging the exchange. Leave it, she said. He left it. She turned back to the glass and, deliberately, shifted her chair 3 centimeters to the right. Her reflection shifted with her. The first visitor followed the reflection, not the movement itself. That was enough to make Oren look up sharply. Lena saw it too. Not line of sight. Not just preference. Tracking behavior tied to the returned image. Not the body. She placed the pen on top of the paper. Straight. Centered. You said direct form is loud. Does this room contain a previous human image? Not image. Impression. From whom? The first visitor was silent. The second answered. The one you sent earlier. Oren said. We sent no one. The layered voice from the glass replied at once. Your systems did. No one moved after that. The monitor delay line held again, then caught up. A faint sound came from the air vent over the entry seam. Not a malfunction. Only the station cycling another increment of filtered air through a room now carrying too many unknowns. Lena looked at her own reflection, then at the place where the first visitor's fingers had rested on the panel. A room cleared at dawn. A surface with memory. A previous human impression in a chamber no one had entered. She folded the blank paper again, this time into a narrow strip, and laid it beside the pen. Then, she said, keeping her voice even, before we discuss peace, we need to establish who spoke to you in my shape. The visitors did not answer. Beyond the glass, the moon turned 1 careful degree, and in the silent panel between them, Lena had the distinct sense that the room was still listening to someone else. Oren did not return to his chair. He stayed near the wall console, not touching it, watching the faint columns of data scroll past on the recessed display. The numbers were slow, deliberate, as if the system had chosen caution over speed. That was not standard behavior. Lena kept her eyes on the glass. Her reflection held still, the folded strip of paper resting beside her hand. The pen lay centered across it, a quiet marker of where she had decided to stop writing and start watching. The visitors did not shift. "Show me the trace," Oren said to the room. The system paused before answering. A thin line appeared along the lower edge of the glass panel, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. It pulsed once, then expanded upward into a faint overlay, no color, only a difference in the way the light bent across the surface. Lena leaned forward slightly. The overlay did not show a person. It showed absence shaped like a person. A region where the reflection failed to match the room, where angles misaligned by small degrees. The outline was human only in proportion, not in detail. Oren stepped closer. "Timestamp?" he asked. The system hesitated again. "Unresolved." "Define unresolved." "Multiple temporal registrations." Lena did not look away from the glass. "It doesn't know when it was made. Or it knows too many times at once," Oren said. The first visitor inclined its head. "Your interpreter approaches correctly." Lena placed 2 fingers on the edge of the table, aligning them with the paper's fold. "You said we already struck the surface. That implies an earlier exchange. With someone who wasn't physically here. The impression was left by contact." "Physical contact?" A pause. "Not necessarily." Oren exhaled once through his nose. "That narrows nothing." Lena asked, "What did this impression do?" The second visitor responded. "It attempted direct address." "Spoke to you," Lena said. "It struck the surface." The phrase returned, unchanged. Lena watched the faint distortion in the glass. The absence shape did not move, but the reflection around it adjusted, as if the panel were correcting for something that no longer aligned with the room. "What happened when it did?" The third visitor answered this time. The exchange collapsed. Oren's gaze flicked to Lena, then back to the glass. "Define collapse." Meaning did not return. Lena let that sit. She reached for the pen, then stopped before touching it. Instead, she shifted the folded strip of paper a fraction to the left. Her reflection did the same. The first visitor's attention followed the movement in the glass, not the motion of her hand. She said, "You're not watching me. You're watching what comes back." "Yes." "Because that's where meaning holds." "Yes." Oren stepped away from the console by a single pace. "Then the impression is still active." "Or residual," Lena said. He shook his head once. "Residuals don't interfere with live response." The side monitor's delay line paused again, longer this time. When it moved, it skipped a segment, then corrected. Oren noticed. "There." Lena did not turn. "I see it." He crossed to the table and set his tablet down beside her papers. The screen lit with a simple graph response time against system baseline. The line should have been flat. It wasn't. It rose in small increments, each one tied to the moments the glass overlay pulsed. "It's feeding into the system," he said quietly. "Not as a signal, as a condition." Lena looked at the graph, then at the glass. "Like pressure. Or friction." The first visitor spoke. "The impression is not passive." Oren glanced at it. "We've gathered that. It is attempting to complete its exchange." Lena's fingers stilled on the table. "With whom?" The answer came without delay. "With US." The room held that for a moment. Then Oren said, "And now with us." The first visitor did not correct him. Lena asked, "What did it say?" The visitors were silent. She tried a different angle. "What did it ask for?" The second visitor shifted again, a tightening through the upper frame. "It requested peace terms." "That's what we're here to do," Lena said. It did not understand them. Oren let out a short breath. Then it failed. The failure is ongoing. Lena's reflection seemed to hold her gaze more firmly than the room itself. "Show me where it intersects," she said. The system hesitated, then extended the overlay. The absence shape grew clearer. Not a body, but a boundary. Where it overlapped Lena's reflection, the image blurred slightly, as if 2 versions of the same gesture tried to occupy the same space. Oren leaned closer, careful not to cross into the projection. "It's aligned with you," he said. Lena did not move. "Offset by a few centimeters," he added. And a fraction of a second. She nodded once. A returned form that doesn't quite return. The first visitor inclined its head. Correct. Lena considered that. If it attempted direct address, she said slowly. Then it spoke without using the reflection. Yes. And that damaged the exchange. Yes. Because meaning didn't come back. Yes. She let her hand hover over the paper again, then lowered it without touching anything. Then we don't speak to you, she said. The visitors remained still. We speak to what comes back. A pause. Then you approach us. Oren looked at her. Not approval. Recognition. Lena shifted her chair another centimeter to the right. Her reflection moved. The absence shape did not fully follow. It lagged, then corrected, leaving a thin distortion where it had been. The first visitor tracked the reflection's new position. Lena spoke again, but not to the figures in the room. She addressed the glass. My name is Lena Vale. The translation field activated. The words returned, slightly altered. I am Lena Vale. The difference was small, but it was there. Oren saw it. His hand tightened once on the edge of the table. The first visitor inclined its head further, aligning itself with the returned phrase. This is usable. Lena continued, still addressing the panel. I was sent to negotiate peace. The translation field pulsed. I was sent to negotiate peace. The absence shape shifted. Not much. A tremor along its boundary. Oren pointed at it. There. Lena did not look. What does it need? She asked the reflection. The room waited. Then the returned voice, layered, precise, answered. It requires completion. Completion of what? The statement. Oren frowned. It already made one. It did not return. Lena's hand moved, almost without intent, toward the pen. She stopped again, leaving a small space between her fingers and the object. If it couldn't return meaning, she said, then it couldn't close its own exchange. Yes. And now it's still trying. Yes. The monitor delay line froze. Not a hesitation. A stop. The blue bar held in place, unresponsive. Oren swore under his breath. Systems locking. Lena finally turned her head toward him. Can you isolate it? Not without altering the room. She looked back at the glass. The absence shape was more defined now, as if the system's slowdown had given it more room to assert itself. It overlapped her reflection at the shoulder, the edge of the face, the line of the hand. She said very evenly, Then we finish it. Oren stared at her. You don't know what it started. No, she said, but we know how it failed. He hesitated. The first visitor spoke. If you complete the exchange, the impression will release. Or it will overwrite, Oren said. The third visitor answered. Only if you strike the surface. Lena nodded once. She reached for the pen. This time she picked it up. The motion was simple. No hesitation. No flourish. She held it over the paper, then lowered it until the tip touched the blank surface. Her reflection did the same. The absence shape lagged, then caught up, its boundary bending around the movement. She did not write. Instead, she said, to the glass, State your opening. The room held its breath, not metaphorically, but in the small, measurable way that air systems reduce flow when sensors detect irregular patterns. The returned voice spoke, not Lena's, not the visitor's. A third tone, thinner, misaligned. We request. The sentence broke. The overlay flickered. The absence shape spasmed, its edges blurring. Oren stepped forward. Lena! She raised her hand, not looking at him. Again, she said. The returned voice tried. We request. It failed in the same place. The monitor remained frozen. The air vent above the door made a soft, uneven sound. Lena adjusted the pen in her fingers, rotated it once, set it down. Not request, she said quietly. That's not where it failed. She slid the folded strip of paper closer to the center of the table. Her reflection followed. The absence shape dragged behind it, leaving a thin wake of distortion. She spoke again. Begin with acknowledgement. The returned voice answered, this time more stable. We acknowledge. Held. The first visitor inclined its head sharply. Continue. The absence shape was more defined now, as if the system's slowdown had given it more room to assert itself. It overlapped her reflection at the shoulder, the edge of the face, the line of the hand. She said very evenly, "Then we finish it." Oren stared at her. "You don't know what it started." "No," she said, "but we know how it failed." He hesitated. The first visitor spoke. "If you complete the exchange, the impression will release. Or it will overwrite," Oren said. The third visitor answered, "Only if you strike the surface." Lena nodded once. She reached for the pen. This time she picked it up. The motion was simple. No hesitation. No flourish. She held it over the paper, then lowered it until the tip touched the blank surface. Her reflection did the same. The absence shape lagged, then caught up, its boundary bending around the movement. She did not write. Instead, she said, to the glass, "State your opening." The room held its breath, not metaphorically, but in the small, measurable way that air systems reduce flow when sensors detect irregular patterns. The returned voice spoke, not Lena's, not the visitor's. A third tone, thinner, misaligned. "We request." The sentence broke. The overlay flickered. The absence shape spasmed, its edges blurring. Oren stepped forward. "Lena." She raised her hand, not looking at him. "Again," she said. The returned voice tried. "We request." It failed in the same place. The monitor remained frozen. The air vent above the door made a soft, uneven sound. Lena adjusted the pen in her fingers, rotated it once, set it down. "Not request," she said quietly. "That's not where it failed." She slid the folded strip of paper closer to the center of the table. Her reflection followed. The absence shape dragged behind it, leaving a thin wake of distortion. She spoke again. "Begin with acknowledgement." The returned voice answered, this time more stable. "We acknowledge." Held. The first visitor inclined its head sharply. "Continue." Lena did not rush. She watched the reflection, the shape within it, the way the words seemed to anchor differently when they came back. "State what you acknowledge," she said. The returned voice hesitated. Then, "We acknowledge the human." It faltered. The absence shape flickered. Oren said, "It's losing cohesion." Lena ignored him. "Not human," she said. "That's too direct." She shifted her chair a fraction. Her reflection shifted. The first visitor followed. The absence shape lagged again. Lena tried once more. "Say, we acknowledge the returned form." The room waited. Then the voice, thin, strained, answered. "We acknowledge the returned form." This time it did not break. The overlay steadied. The absence shape tightened, its edges less diffuse. Oren exhaled slowly. "That's it." Lena did not look at him. "Continue," she said. The returned voice spoke again, finding its path. "We acknowledge the returned form. We seek." Paused. The delay line on the monitor flickered back to life, jumping forward in a single, uneven motion. Oren stared at it. Systems unlocking. Lena kept her eyes on the glass. The absence shape was no longer overlapping her reflection as strongly. It had begun to separate, pulling back toward its own outline. She said, very softly, "Finish it." The returned voice completed the sentence. "We seek terms that can return without damage." Silence followed. Not the station's controlled quiet. Something cleaner. The overlay dimmed. The absence shape thinned, then receded into the surface until only the room remained. The delay line resumed its steady motion. Oren stepped back from the table. He did not speak. The first visitor lowered its head, a motion that might have been acknowledgement. "The exchange is complete." Lena set the pen down. She did not look at the visitors. She looked at her reflection, now clean, aligned, holding only her own shape. The folded strip of paper lay beside the pen, exactly where she had placed it. Nothing else in the room moved. The air system returned to its normal rhythm. It was a small thing, The faint unevenness in the vent smoothed out, the low current of filtered air settling into the steady cycle that the station preferred. The kind of detail most people stopped noticing after a few minutes. Oren noticed. He stood where he was, one hand resting lightly on the back of the misaligned chair, watching the side monitor as the delay line moved without interruption. The graph on his tablet flattened. Not perfectly, but close enough to suggest the disturbance had ended. Lena remained seated. Her hands rested on the table, not touching the paper or the pen. The reflection in the glass was clean again. No distortion, no overlay. Only the room doubled. The three visitors had not moved. For a moment, nothing needed to. Then the first spoke. The impression has released. Lena inclined her head slightly toward the glass, not toward the speaker. What remains? She asked. A pause. Trace without intent. Oren shifted his weight. Residual. The first visitor did not contradict him this time. Lena reached for the folded strip of paper and straightened it, smoothing the crease with her thumb. The action was precise, unhurried. Then we proceed, she said. She did not ask if they were ready. She placed the strip beside the original stack, aligning the edges again. The pen stayed where it was, horizontal, centered. We have a shared objective, she continued. You want terms that return without damage. We want cessation that holds. The second visitor adjusted its stance by a fraction, the layered segments of its garment shifting with a dry, almost inaudible friction. Objectives are compatible. Methods have not been. Lena nodded once. Then we address method. She shifted her chair back by a centimeter, then forward again, settling into a slightly different angle relative to the glass. Her reflection adjusted with her. The first visitor followed the reflection. Oren watched that. Before we define terms, Lena said, still addressing the panel, we need a stable channel. The returned form is stable when not struck. Then we maintain it. She lifted her hand and placed it flat on the table, palm down, fingers relaxed. The reflection mirrored the gesture. The visitor's attention stayed with the reflection. Oren moved around the table, slow enough not to disrupt the line between Lena and the glass. He took the chair he had adjusted earlier and turned it slightly more, aligning it with the panel rather than the table. He did not sit. Instead, he leaned one hand on the backrest, his posture angled so he could see both Lena's reflection and the visitor's orientation. Channel stability isn't just behavior, he said. It's environment. We need to know what else in the room can interfere. Lena did not turn. List it. Oren glanced at the console. Glass panel response time is normal now. Airflow is stable. No foreign signals in the system. He paused. Except one thing. Lena waited. The translation field. The first visitor inclined its head. The field introduces approximation. Approximation leads to drift, Oren said. Yes. Lena tapped the table once, lightly. Then we reduce reliance on it. She lifted the pen and drew a short line on the top sheet of paper. The mark was simple, horizontal. Her reflection drew the same line. The visitors watched the reflection. This is direct, she said. The translation field rendered it. This is direct. She drew a second line parallel to the first. This is returned. The translation followed. This is returned. The first visitor leaned slightly closer to the glass. The distinction is accepted. Lena set the pen down again. We use both, she said. But we prioritize what returns. Oren nodded once. Redundancy without conflict. The third visitor spoke. This reduces damage. Lena slid the paper a fraction closer to the center of the table. Her reflection followed. The visitor's attention shifted with it. Now, she said, we define the first term. She did not look at Oren, but he understood. He reached into the field case without opening it fully, extracting a thin strip of material, a flexible sensor band. He placed it on the table near Lena's papers, aligning it with the edge. He did not activate it. Passive read, he said quietly. No emission. Lena acknowledged with a slight tilt of her head. She spoke again to the glass. Term 1. Cessation of active engagement along the Keled corridor. The translation field rendered it. Term 1. Cessation of active engagement along the Keled corridor. The words returned cleanly. The first visitor responded. Define cessation. Lena anticipated that. No directed movement across the boundary. No targeting of vessels. No deployment of assets. The translation held. The returned voice mirrored it. No directed movement. No targeting. No deployment. The absence shape did not reappear. Oren watched for it anyway. The second visitor shifted slightly. What of observation? Lena considered that. Observation remains, she said. Passive only. The translation carried it. The return was stable. Passive observation is acceptable. Oren's fingers tightened briefly on the chair. He was tracking something else now. Not the words, but the timing between them. Lena noticed. What is it? She asked, without turning. The return lag, he said. It's consistent. No drift. That's good. It means the channel is holding. Lena nodded. She moved the folded strip of paper again, aligning it with the new position of the written lines. The motion was small, deliberate. Her reflection mirrored it. The visitors followed. Term 2, she said. She did not write it immediately. Instead, she watched the glass for a moment longer than necessary. Then, exchange of corridor telemetry. The translation field rendered it. Exchange of corridor telemetry. The return followed. Exchange of corridor telemetry. The first visitor did not respond at once. The second did. Data can be struck. Lena understood. Then we define format. She picked up the pen again, drew a short sequence of symbols, simple, geometric, non-linguistic. Her reflection drew them. The visitors watched. We use structures that return without alteration, she said. Patterns, not language. The translation field struggled for a fraction of a second, then produced structures that return without alteration. Patterns, not language. The returned voice held. The first visitor inclined its head. This is compatible. Oren stepped closer to the table. He pointed at the symbols Lena had drawn. Those will need to be validated, he said. We can't assume shared interpretation. Lena nodded. We test them. She turned slightly toward the glass. Provide a pattern. The third visitor responded. A sequence appeared not on the glass, but in the translation field itself. A string of tones, rendered as visual markers along the table's surface display. Lena watched them. Then she drew the sequence on paper, replicating it as best she could. Her reflection did the same. The returned voice echoed the pattern. It matched. Oren exhaled once. Good. Lena set the pen down. Term 2 is accepted, she said. The visitors did not object. The room held steady. For a moment the process felt almost simple. Then Oren spoke again. Lena. She turned her head slightly. He was looking at the glass, but not at the reflection. At the edge, he said. She followed his gaze. There, near the lower right corner of the panel, the light bent differently again. Not an overlay. Not the absence shape. Something smaller. A line. Thin, almost invisible, running along the seam where the panel met the wall. It did not move, but it did not belong. Lena watched it for a few seconds. Then she asked, very quietly, Is that part of the system? Oren shook his head once. No. The first visitor spoke. The trace remains. Lena kept her eyes on the line. I thought the impression had released. His intent has. His effect has not. Oren stepped closer to the panel, stopping just short of crossing the line of reflection. It's not interacting, he said. Just present. Lena considered that. Then she shifted her chair again, a small adjustment. Her reflection moved. The line did not. The visitor's attention followed the reflection, not the line. That's interesting, Oren said. Lena nodded. It's not part of the returned form. Residual, he said. Or boundary. The words settled between them. The first visitor inclined its head. Boundary is acceptable. Lena looked at the glass, at the clean reflection, at the thin line that marked something left behind. Then she placed her hand back on the table, palm down, steady. "Then we continue," she said. The negotiation resumed, not as it had begun, but as something quieter, more precise. Each term placed carefully. Each response returned, checked, aligned. The room held. The glass held. And beneath it all, the faint line at the edge of the panel remained, unmoving, as if it were waiting for something that had not yet been said. The thin line at the edge of the panel did not move. It remained where the glass met the wall, a faint interruption in the way light settled along the seam. Not bright enough to draw attention on its own. Only noticeable once you had seen it. Lena had. She did not look at it again. Instead, she adjusted the top sheet of paper by a fraction, aligning it with the strip beneath. The edge caught the light differently when it was exact. Her reflection followed, precise. The visitors tracked the reflection. Oren shifted his stance, redistributing his weight from one foot to the other. His hand left the back of the chair and moved to the table, resting near the sensor band without touching it. "Term 3, Lena said. She spoke to the glass. "Mutual withdrawal of autonomous probes within the corridor." The translation field rendered it. "Mutual withdrawal of autonomous probes within the corridor." The return followed cleanly. "Mutual withdrawal of autonomous probes within the corridor." The first visitor inclined its head. "Define autonomous." Lena expected that. No direct oversight. Independent navigation. Decision-making without immediate command. The translation held. The return held. The second visitor responded. "Acceptable if verified." Oren spoke, still watching the glass. "Verification requires observation." Lena nodded slightly. "Passive only," she said. The translation carried it. The return mirrored it. "Passive only." The room remained steady. The delay line on the side monitor moved without hesitation. The air system maintained its rhythm. The thin line at the panel edge did not change. Oren glanced at it once, then back to the reflection. "Term 4, Lena said. She did not write it yet. Instead, she moved the pen a centimeter to the right. Her reflection moved the pen. The visitors followed. "Shared boundary definition," she said. The translation field rendered it. "Shared boundary definition." The return echoed. "Shared boundary definition." The first visitor paused longer this time. Then, "Boundaries are not fixed." Lena watched the reflection. "They need to be, for this to hold. Fixed boundaries invite striking." Oren looked at her. "That's not wrong," he said quietly. Lena considered. Then she drew a short line on the paper. Not straight, slightly curved. "This is a boundary," she said. The translation carried it. "This is a boundary." She drew a second line, parallel but not identical. "This is a return." The translation followed. "This is a return." She looked at the glass. "They don't match exactly," she said, "but they hold shape." The first visitor inclined its head. "Adaptive boundary." "Yes." The return held. "Adaptive boundary." Oren exhaled slowly. "That works." Lena set the pen down again. "Term 4 is adaptive boundary definition." The visitors did not object. The negotiation continued. Each term placed. Each response returned. The process remained controlled. Until the line moved. It was small. A shift along the seam barely perceptible. But it was not where it had been. Oren saw it first. "Lena." She did not turn. "Where?" "Lower right." It moved. She looked. The line was still there, but not in the same position. A few millimeters higher, as if it had adjusted itself. The first visitor spoke. "The trace is responding." Lena kept her voice even. "To what?" A pause. "To completion." Oren frowned. "That doesn't make sense. The impression is gone. Effect remains." Lena watched the line. It did not move again. "What kind of effect?" The second visitor answered. "Partial return." Oren stepped closer to the panel, careful not to cross the reflection line. "Partial of what?" No answer. Lena shifted her chair again, a small adjustment. Her reflection moved. The visitors followed. The line did not. That's consistent, Oren said. It's not tied to the returned form. Then what is it tied to? Lena asked. The third visitor spoke. To what was not completed. Lena considered that. We completed the exchange, she said. You completed your exchange. The distinction settled. Oren looked at her. There were two sides to it, he said. Lena nodded once. And only one finished. She turned her attention fully to the glass. Then we find the other. The room held that. The delay line continued its steady motion. The air system remained unchanged. The line at the panel edge stayed where it was. For now. Lena placed her hand flat on the table again. Her reflection mirrored it. The visitors aligned with the reflection. Show me what remains incomplete, she said. The translation field rendered it. Show me what remains incomplete. The return followed. Show me what remains incomplete. Nothing happened. No overlay. No distortion. The glass remained clear. Oren waited. Then he said, It's not going to present itself the same way. Lena did not move. Then we changed the approach. She picked up the pen again. Drew a single point on the paper. Centered. Her reflection drew it. The visitors watched. This is a start, she said. The translation carried it. This is a start. She paused. Then, this is a return. She drew a second point slightly offset. The translation followed. This is a return. She looked at the glass. What connects them? The returned voice did not answer. The line at the panel edge shifted again. This time slightly downward. Oren saw it. There. Lena followed his gaze. The line had moved. Not randomly. In response. She understood. It's not showing, she said. It's reacting. Oren nodded. To what? She looked at the paper. At the 2 points. At the space between them. Then she drew a line connecting them. Not straight. Slightly curved. The reflection followed. The visitors aligned. The returned voice spoke. Connection is required. The line at the panel edge moved again. Aligning with the curve she had drawn. Oren exhaled slowly. That's not residual. No, Lena said. It's active. The first visitor inclined its head. The trace seeks completion. Lena watched the alignment. What was the second exchange? She asked. The visitors did not answer. She tried a different approach. Not what was said, she said. What was done? The third visitor responded. The impression attempted to define boundary. Oren's gaze sharpened. Before it collapsed. Yes. Lena looked at the curved line on the paper. At the matching shift along the panel seam. At the same point we're at now, she said. The first visitor inclined its head. Yes. Lena set the pen down. Carefully. Aligned with the paper. Her reflection mirrored the motion. The visitors followed. The line at the panel edge held. She placed both hands on the table. Flat. Steady. Then we complete that term, she said. Oren looked at her. You're sure? No, she said. Then, after a moment, but it's consistent. She turned her attention to the glass. Define boundary, she said. The translation field rendered it. Define boundary. The return followed. Define boundary. The room waited. Then the returned voice spoke. Not Lena's. Not the visitors. The same thin, misaligned tone from before. Boundary is where return holds without loss. The line at the panel edge shifted again, aligning more closely with the curve on the paper. Oren watched it. It's stabilizing. Lena did not look away from the glass. Continue, she said. The returned voice responded. Boundary must adapt to maintain return. The words held. No break. No distortion. The line at the panel edge stopped moving. It remained where it was. Aligned. Stable. The first visitor lowered its head slightly. The second exchange is complete. The room settled. Not a change in sound. A change in absence. The sense of something unfinished no longer present. Oren stepped back from the panel. He did not speak. Lena looked at her reflection. At the clean alignment. at the absence of the line's movement. Then she moved the paper back to its original position. Centered. The pen followed. Aligned. Nothing in the room resisted. The negotiation resumed. Not as a correction, as a continuation. Each term placed. Each return checked. Each boundary defined. And this time, nothing remained incomplete. The pen rolled 0.5 millimeter and stopped. It did not fall. It did not reach the edge of the paper. It turned once along its axis, then settled as if it had found a point of balance that had not been there before. Lena saw it. She did not touch it. Across the table, Oren's hand moved slightly closer to the sensor band, then stopped. He watched the pen for a second, then shifted his gaze to the glass. The reflection showed the pen exactly as it was. No delay, no correction. The visitors remained aligned with the reflection. The room held. Lena said, "Term 5. Her voice was steady, directed toward the panel. Dispute resolution without direct contact. The translation field rendered it. Dispute resolution without direct contact. The return followed. Dispute resolution without direct contact. The first visitor inclined its head. Define resolution. Lena expected that. She adjusted the paper slightly, not to align it, but to create a small gap between it and the sensor band. The space mattered. Resolution is a change that holds, she said. Not a statement. The translation carried it. The return held. Change that holds. Oren nodded once. Verification, he asked. Lena answered without looking at him. Observed return. The translation field rendered it. Observed return. The visitors did not object. The process continued. Term 5 settled into place. The pen remained where it had stopped. Lena did not move it. Instead, she placed her fingers lightly on the table, just beside it, not touching. Her reflection mirrored the gesture. The visitors followed. Term 6, she said. She paused before defining it. Not for effect. For alignment. The room was stable. The returns were clean. The boundary held. But something in the pen's movement suggested a shift. Not in the system, but in the conditions beneath it. She said, "Delayed response protocol." The translation field rendered it. Delayed response protocol. The return followed. Delayed response protocol. The second visitor spoke. Define delay. Lena glanced once at the side monitor. The delay line moved smoothly. No immediate reply required, she said. Time allowed for return to stabilize. The translation carried it. The return held. Time allowed for return to stabilize. Oren's gaze moved from the monitor to the glass. That would have prevented the first collapse, he said quietly. Lena did not respond. The first visitor inclined its head. This reduces striking. The term settled. 6 terms now. Each one placed without distortion. Each one returned intact. The negotiation had reached a point where the structure itself carried momentum. Lena shifted her chair slightly backward. Her reflection followed. The visitors adjusted. The pen did not move. Oren noticed that. He leaned closer to the table, careful not to cross the reflection line. It's stable, he said. Everything is, Lena replied. Not everything. She did not ask. He nodded toward the pen. It reacted once, he said, then stopped. Lena looked at it. It found equilibrium. Or it was placed there. She considered that. Then she reached out and very gently rotated the pen a fraction. The motion was controlled. Minimal. Her reflection mirrored it. The visitors followed. The pen did not resist. Turned, then stopped again. In a slightly different position. Oren watched. Same behavior, he said. Consistent, Lena replied. The first visitor spoke. The system is adjusting to completion. Lena looked at the glass. What system? A pause. The exchange. Oren exhaled slowly. That's not a system, he said. It is now. The words held. Lena let them settle. Then she said, then we define its limits. The translation field rendered it. Then we define its limits. The return followed. Then we define its limits. The third visitor spoke. Limits prevent overwrite. Oren's gaze sharpened. Overwrite of what? No answer. Lena did not press. Instead, she placed the pen back exactly where it had been before she touched it. Aligned with the paper. Centered. Her reflection followed. The visitors aligned. Term 7, she said. She did not write it. She spoke it. Exchange isolation. The translation field rendered it. Exchange isolation. The return followed. Exchange isolation. The first visitor inclined its head. Define isolation. Lena's fingers rested lightly on the table. No external influence, she said. No additional inputs. The translation carried it. The return held. No external influence. No additional inputs. Oren nodded. That closes the loop. The term settled. 7 terms. Each one placed. Each one returned. The structure was complete. Or nearly. Lena looked at the glass. At her reflection. At the absence of distortion. At the clean alignment of the room. Then she said, final term. The translation field rendered it. Final term. The return followed. Final term. She paused. Not long. Just enough to ensure the return held before continuing. Mutual recognition of completion. The translation carried it. Mutual recognition of completion. The return followed. Mutual recognition of completion. The room held. The delay line moved steadily. The air system remained unchanged. The pen did not move. The first visitor inclined its head. Define completion. Lena looked at the glass. Nothing remains to return, she said. The translation field rendered it. Nothing remains to return. The return followed. Nothing remains to return. The words held. No distortion. No delay. No interruption. The visitors remained still. Oren watched the panel. No line. No overlay. No shift. The room was clean. The first visitor spoke. Completion is accepted. The second followed. Completion is accepted. The third. Completion is accepted. The translation field echoed them. The return held. Completion is accepted. Lena did not move. She looked at her reflection. At the alignment. At the absence of anything unfinished. Then she reached for the pen. Not to write. To close. She placed it perpendicular to the paper. A small, deliberate change. Her reflection mirrored it. The visitors followed. The room held. Oren stepped back from the table. He did not speak. He did not need to. The negotiation was complete. Not with a declaration. With a state. Nothing remained to return. The chamber remained still. The glass reflected only what was present. And for the first time since they had entered, the room did not feel like it was waiting. The chair nearest the door sat a few millimeters off its line. Oren noticed it as he reached for the case. He paused, then nudged the chair back into alignment with his foot. The legs made a soft contact with the floor, barely audible. He left it there and straightened, his hand resting briefly on the top edge of the case before he opened it. Inside, the instruments lay as he had left them. No shift, no vibration. He closed the lid again without removing anything. Across the room, Lena remained seated. Her hands rested on the table, one near the paper, one near the pen. She did not touch either. The reflection in the glass held her shape cleanly, without delay, without correction. The 3 visitors had not moved since their last acknowledgement. The chamber did not prompt them to leave. There was no signal for conclusion, only the absence of interruption. Oren walked back to the table and stopped at the edge of the reflection line. He did not cross it. He looked at Lena, then at the glass. Systems are stable, he said. She nodded once. No residual trace? He glanced at the lower right seam. None that's active. She let that sit. Then she moved her hand. A small adjustment. Her fingers slid a fraction closer to the paper, stopping just before contact. The reflection followed. The visitor's attention followed. No shift in the panel. No response from the room. Lena withdrew her hand. Then we close, she said. She did not raise her voice. She did not change her posture. The words were placed the same way as the terms had been. Measured. Returned. The translation field rendered it. Then we close. The return followed. Then we close. The first visitor inclined its head. Closure is accepted. The second. Closure is accepted. The third. Closure is accepted. The layered voices held their structure, then faded into the ambient quiet of the chamber. No further response came. Lena remained still for a moment longer. Then she reached for the paper. She gathered the sheets into a single stack, aligning the edges with a light tap against the table. The motion was precise. The reflection mirrored it exactly. She did not look at the visitors. She looked at the glass, at the absence of anything extra, at the clean return. Then she slid the stack toward the center of the table and left it there. Oren watched. He did not move to take the papers. He did not speak. The visitors turned. Not toward the door, toward the glass. For a moment, their reflections aligned with their forms. Then they stepped away. The alignment broke cleanly, without distortion. They crossed the chamber without sound, their movement as controlled as when they had entered. At the threshold, they paused not to look back, but to allow the seam to open. The light at the entry widened. They exited. The seam closed. The chamber returned to its original state. No prompt, no signal, only the room. Oren exhaled once. Not relief, a release of held attention. He moved to the table and picked up the pen. He turned it between his fingers once, then set it down exactly where Lena had placed it before the final term, perpendicular to the paper. He adjusted it by a fraction until it matched the reflection. Then he stepped back. Nothing left, he said. Lena stood. She did not push the chair back abruptly. She rose, lifted it slightly, and set it down again in line with the table. The legs touched the floor without sound. She looked at the glass one last time, at her reflection, at the room behind it. Everything aligned. She turned away. Oren moved to the wall console and placed his hand on the control surface. This time he did not hesitate. He initiated the room reset. The system responded immediately. The lights shifted, not brighter, but different, returning to baseline configuration. The translation field powered down. The side monitor cleared its graph, returning to a neutral display. The glass remained unchanged. No overlay, no trace. Oren watched the seam at the edge of the panel. Nothing moved. He stepped away from the console. Lena walked to the door. She paused at the threshold, her hand resting lightly near the seam. For a moment, she did not trigger it. She looked back once. Not at Oren. At the table. At the paper. At the pen. At the alignment of objects that no longer required attention. Then she opened the door. The corridor beyond was brighter, the station's regular lighting restoring a different kind of clarity. The air moved differently there, less controlled, more open. She stepped through. Oren followed. The door closed behind them. Inside the chamber, the table remained as it was. The paper stack centered. The pen placed across it, perpendicular. The chairs aligned. The glass reflecting only what was present. No delay. No return. No trace. For a moment the room held its shape. Then the side monitor flickered. Not a delay. A single frame. A line appearing where none had been. Thin. Precise. At the lower right edge of the panel. It did not move. It did not expand. It remained. Then, without change, the monitor returned to its neutral state. The room continued. Unaware. Outside, Lena and Oren walked down the corridor. Neither spoke. Their steps were measured, in sync without intention. At the first junction, Oren slowed. "Report," he asked. Lena did not stop. "Complete," she said. He nodded. They continued. Behind them, the chamber remained sealed. Quiet. Controlled. And at the edge of the glass, where light met surface, something held its position without asking to be returned.